Kia ora friends, welcome back to my studio. I'm Gina, and in today's video I'm going to be making Wednesday's chandelier, and to make the frame for it where the beading is going to be attached to, I'm going to do that two different ways. The first way is with some plastic, which is just some common packaging plastic that I've got laying around, and a plastic straw and a bit of glue, and it's a nice easy way to make a structure for the beading to sit onto. And the second way, I am going to use some wire and some solder, making more of a metal frame, and then using some different types of beads to actually create the chandelier. So let's get started. So to begin with, what I'm going to do is cut two circles, one slightly smaller than the other, out of just some scrap packaging material. And what I'm trying to do is create a frame that is going to be almost invisible once it's complete. So I'm just going to cut these two circles out of the plastic, and then I'm going to cut a length of clear plastic and then just slightly bend that around, and then cut my straw to length, and now I can start gluing all these pieces together. So what I wanted to do was just create a little bit more substance to the two circles, so I'm just gluing around the edge that strip of plastic that I've cut away, and I've just quickly tacked it on with some hot glue, and then I'm going back with some super glue to make it nice and strong. So with the straw, what I'm doing is just grabbing 3 beads. These are just 2mm glass beads, and I'm actually sewing it onto the top of the straw. So this is just one way of doing it to make sure that it's nice and secure, and the plastic is nice and malleable that it's easy enough to poke a hole through with the needle. Once I'm happy with that, I'm going to attach a piece of thread to those 3 beads that I've already sewn into the top, and then I'm going to string a length of beads down the bottom. Now this is going to make up most of the chandelier, and to secure them in place, what I'm doing is I'm just going back through and threading the thread back up through the beads again, just so that I don't have any threads hanging out the bottom. I hope that makes sense. And then just sort of tacking that into place at the very top. And then this is what it's going to start to look like. We're just going to have these little spider legs sort of sitting out the back bottom of it. And then once that's all done all the way around, I can glue the straw onto that larger circle. And then I can also start gluing some other beads that I've also strung together on the inside of the smaller circle. So we're wanting to create a tiered chandelier effect. And then just before we glue the bottom piece in, I'm just going to go around with a bit of hot glue and just glue those little longer pieces onto the outside of the larger circle. And then once I'm happy with that, I can glue the smaller circle inside the larger one, and that's what it's going to look like. So moving on to the next version, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a couple of jump rings. These are quite larger jump rings, and then I'm just going to tape those down to a wooden board, just so that I can make sure that the distancing between them stays even. You can see the one up on the top right isn't very even. So I'm just going to make sure that these are really even, and then just using a bit of wire, I'm just going to solder that to both rings to make sure that they distance apart. And I'm just going to work my way around. And these pieces of wire are too long, and I do go back and cut those off. And then I take a smaller ring for the very top of the chandelier, and I'm just soldering on some pieces of wire. I'm just soldering 3 evenly spaced around the top, and then I can use those from the top of the chandelier, bend them round to capture those 2 hoops that I've already created, and then solder those longer pieces to the outside of the hoop at the bottom. And then I'm just going to do a little bit at the top. So like I say, these have got some slightly different beads. So these are bugle beads, so they're just sort of long cylindrical beads, and I've got some sort of earring findings. So these are just some long pieces, and they've got a stopper thing at the end, and I'm just putting 3 beads on them and then just bending them round, and that's all I'm going to do. And then I'm just going to go through and pop the 3 beads on these little findings on the inside hoop, and then I'm going to do exactly the same thing with only 2 beads, and I'm going to go around on the outside loop. So hopefully that makes more sense as we kind of work through. So I'm just threading 3 beads onto that little, I don't know what you call it, it's a pin like it's a pin, but it's got a very flat head on one end so that the beads don't come off, and it just creates a nice structure for the chandelier. With the 2 beads, I'm just going to cut a bit off the length because they are just a bit too long. I'm just going to thread the 2 beads on, bend the wire around using these jewellery pliers and some of my fingers. It's quite small, and then I'm just going to pop that onto the outside of the hoop that I've created, and I'm just going to put those all the way around. Once I'm happy with how that is starting to look, I'm just going to secure that all into place with a bit of E6000 jewellery and bead glue. So I'm just going to run a bit of glue all the way around the top, which is going to capture both of those 2 layers, and then I'm just going to leave that overnight to dry, because otherwise, just because they're just hooked over there, they would have come off really easily. Then to make the pieces that come, the length of beads that come from the very top down to those rings of beads that I've already created, I'm actually using some 2mm glass beads, so very similar to the ones that I've used on the first chandelier. The first chandelier were white beads, these are going to be clear glass beads, so it's going to give it a slightly different look. Then all I'm doing is just tying those to the beads at the bottom, and I'm just going to work my way around and create these lengths of beads. In the end, I found it easier to use my tweezers to put them onto my bead needle. This bead needle is awesome. It's really long, and if you separate it out, it's got a really wide gap in the middle, and it's probably one of the best purchases I've made with doing beads rather than just using a normal sewing needle. So it is absolutely fantastic. So I'm just threading a length of beads onto a piece of thread and just making sure that they're the right length, and then I'm just tying that off around the edge. So that's what it's going to look like. Looks a lot more metallic than the first one, and because I need to add a little bit of weight to the miniature, I'm actually just tying a piece of thread right around the middle of it, so it makes it look like the beads are actually hanging down in a sort of a swoop, which is what the chandelier needs to look like. So if you've found this video helpful, give it a big thumbs up and hit that like button, and if you haven't done so already, consider subscribing to the channel. Have a fabulous week, everybody, and until next time, I'll see you then. Bye for now.